2007, we started this project with alternative analysis study where we looked at over 33 alternatives. We then moved forward onto the draft phase with the board approval. And we were very engaged from day one with many of our stakeholders. What's unique about the regional connector is that yes, it's located in downtown, but as Bart was saying, it does quite a bit to connect the region. And with that, I'll move into a brief PowerPoint, and I'm really here today to answer as many questions as possible. With the regional connector, we're connecting three metro lines in downtown Los Angeles. The Pasadena Gold Line, the expo that's going to open in April. I don't think we've gotten that officially, but looking forward to that. And the Blue Line in downtown, that's a 1.9-mile gap, and the regional connector would provide an underground alignment with 3 new stations. It would connect essentially 7th Street Metro Station and connect to First and Alameda. And what I'll do is I can go over, you can see the alignment here. Let's see, it's easier here. So 7th Street Metro, the alignment would be going underneath Flower Street, would then have its first station at 2nd and Hope. It would continue east, going underneath 2nd Street with a station at 2nd and Broadway. It would then be proceeding eastward towards Little Tokyo, veering left underneath the Japanese Village Plaza underneath our parking structure with a station at First and Central. In order to connect to the existing Gold Line that's at grade, there would be a portal allowing trains to connect eastward to East Los Angeles and beyond. And to the north of Temple, trains would then be going underneath Temple and then going over the wall there, MSC wall over the 101, and eventually moving as far east as Montclair. Apologies here. So what does the regional connector do? It closes the gap. It allows folks to travel north-south, one seat, one ride, as well as traveling from west to east, east to west, one seat, one ride. Ultimately, the infrastructure in place, with resources available and whatnot, you'd be able to do various different types of configurations. But right now, we're going to start out with that very simple concept. It would allow folks to travel in an efficient manner, reduce travel time by 30%. Based on the current metro fare structure, you would not need to pay the additional fare. Ultimately, that would need to get reviewed and ultimately changed once this project is implemented and in operation. We had, this is a New Starts project. We've been working diligently with the FTA since day one. Because of what it does in regards to user benefits, as well as making efficiencies and the way we operate our light rail system today and whatnot, this is one of the most cost-effective projects in the country. We're rightly placed to be a recipient of the federal funds. They did grant us permission to enter into preliminary engineering. We started that in January when we initiated the final environmental document. And as a part of that process, we need, since they're our funding partner in the project, every step of the way they need to get us approval. And January 20th, we released our environmental document. I don't know how many of you received it. And we currently ended our review period February 21st, the day after President's Day. The project was deemed to get project approval, so moved from being an actual study to an actual project at the February board meeting. But there were quite a bit of concerns made from our financial district stakeholders that came to our planning and programming meeting the week prior. And their concern concerns, which they've always voiced those from the beginning, was they were concerned about the current cover. In the draft phase, the regional connector had 4 stations. The first one being Fifth and Flower, and then it went to Second and Hope. With the regional connector, this project has never had any funding. In 2007, it started out with absolutely no funding, but when we passed the Major sales tax, it received $160 million. And part of the rationale for that was, since this project was so competitive, then we would be able to compete for the New Starts federal funding. And that's what we stepped forward with. In 2010, when we completed a draft environmental document and we were asking the board to approve the locally preferred alternative, they made a decision at that point to approve the project, or I should say approve the locally preferred alternative, but without the Fifth and Flower Station. So the financial district stakeholders were very upset about that, and they voiced that in October 2010, and continuous meetings since then, they've always discussed their concern about that. What's important to note is in the environmental document, we do not preclude a Fifth and Flower Station from occurring in the future as a separate project. We did in the draft study all the impacts of having a Fifth and Flower Station, so we have done analysis on that, as well as garnered community participation on that station. And what the board decided to do in response to many of the concerns that they were hearing at the planning and programming is they decided to defer the project. So I should say the decision of approving the project to their March board meeting. So we anticipate certifying environmental document, getting project approval at the March meeting. An important step as a part of that process is as well as adopting the mitigation measures, which is always a part of these projects, and then moving forward towards executing, working with the FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, to get what they call a record of decision. That ultimately is their commitment to participate in the project, as well as to allow us to do certain things, such as early utility relocation, for example, or potentially even acquire property. So without the board approval, we can't move forward into those next steps. Where are we in design? We initiated the preliminary engineering in January. We just got board approval to proceed with what we were calling advanced preliminary engineering, and ultimately working with the FTA again to get approval to enter into final design, which we anticipate late summer, early fall. And the next slide highlights much of what I just addressed. The item will again go before the planning and programming, March.
Those dates are wrong.
Right, I believe
It's March.
March
Planning and programming
14th.
is 14th at 1 o'clock here, and then the board meeting is 22nd at 9.
So what we're doing, and staff is doing in response to the board asking us to continue the item, is we're meeting with the financial district stakeholders, really having an open dialogue with them. Today was one of those first meetings where we just talked about existing, talking about the alignment, existing conditions, what the constraints are, and having the opportunity to go over various construction methods. Unfortunately, I cannot say what went on at the meeting because I was asked to give the FTA a tour on the alignment. But I'm imagining that it was a very productive meeting, and it's one of the many, I would imagine, to move forward into hopefully not necessarily coming up with solutions, because 30 days really isn't enough time to do that, but really lay out the foundation of where we are and what type of next steps we can do. Ultimately, with a project of this magnitude, once you get project approval and a record of decision, you do many of these things that we're doing now with the financial district stakeholders, getting familiar with their hours of operations, getting familiar with, what type of access they need, and what can Metro do to minimize the impact of construction. And this slide is if you needed to contact us at all, here's our information. Jenny mentioned that you also had some sign-in sheets if you wanted to get any type of project updates. We'd be happy to send you those. And with that, I would love to answer any questions.
Russ Brown with Downtown LA Neighborhood Council, also a 10-year resident of downtown. And the financial district property owner reps came to our neighborhood council planning meeting. I want to preface this with everybody downtown is very, very, very supportive of the regional connector. Since the station was pulled with no community dialogue at all, a big part of this is the aftermath of that. Does the EIR require cut and cover, or does it, are both cut and cover or the tunnel boring machine covered under the EIR? Because there was some confusion that the financial district using the tunnel boring machine would cause a reopening of the EIR. And it seemed to me the TBM is less invasive than cut and cover, so I don't understand why the EIR would be opened up again. Or was that misinformation?
That was misinformation. Ultimately, with the environmental document, we're obligated to discuss worst case scenario. So we always provide a bigger envelope of potential impact than what actually happens. Keep in mind that the environmental document was completed and released on January 20th, but the design of the project is still in preliminary engineering. So the environmental document describes an envelope, and which allows the design to sort of go on in parallel, but really take the opportunity to refine the impacts described. But ultimately, we're obligated to share the worst case. So in the environmental document for the regional connector, we do describe that for this section in Flower Street, which is the 2 blocks from 4 to 6 essentially, because the tail tracks end at 6th Street, we would be doing cut and cover. However, again, not describing the worst case scenario. My understanding is there's various existing conditions why that type of construction method was chosen. However, it would not preclude any type of refinements that would happen during the PE phase, or now that we got board approval, advanced PE phase.
Question 2. If I've heard that you're not precluding the ability to put a station, back in at Flower, is that only an option if you do the full cut and cover, or is that not an option if you do the TBM?
What the engineers have shared with me is what we're referring to as not precluding a 5th and Flower station is we're providing the space. That means that we're not necessarily putting in equipment in that allocation. And I would need to confirm with you if that would be an issue if you did use the tunnel boring machine. Keep in mind that as we're proceeding south on Flower, we're connecting to an existing station, which is a side platform. And so that in itself adds a constraint, because then the tunnels need to be coming and built in such a way that you can connect those side platforms. The intention of the team and the project would be not to proceed in any way with any type of method that would not allow a future station from being at 5th and Flower.
And it's off the table to do a northern entrance to the 7th Street station near 6th Street?
So my.
In lieu of the
Right,
additional station?
so the board approved the local preferred alternate October 2010. And there was a lot of discussion then because they made that decision at that point to not include the 50 power station. At that board meeting, there was a lot of discussion of, again, meeting with the financial district stakeholders to see what type of participation they would like to see in the future in regards to that station. And I did not participate in this particular meeting because I was out on leave, but there were several meetings held with them to say, would you be amenable, open to having a portal potentially on Wilshire or 6 because of the rail tracks and at 6th Street? Would that be an option? Because then that would, physically extend the existing station at 7th and Metro. My understanding was at the time, they were not interested in having that possibility of a portal on 6th Street.
Firmly disagree with that part of the statement. If no station at all is an option, a northern portal was part of the promise of mitigation.
Jenny, could you
I
elaborate?
was at the meeting, so there was separate meetings. We met with, at the time it was core group. It hadn't yet sold to equity. We also met with Thomas Properties with Lucian in the room. And Thomas G was in the room as well. What was presented to them was both times, well, to Thomas Properties there was a underground connection from, from 6th underground connecting into 7th Street Metro Center. And then they declined. They didn't think it was a good idea because it was underground. It was too long of a stretch to be below ground. And then during the meetings with the core group, they did tell us at that point that they were in the process of selling the building, and also that they had just signed a long-term lease, which is now Cafe Primo. And for full disclosure, I do live in that building. The problem that the core group mentioned was that they would, the entrance to the station at Wilshire and Flower would be right at the front door of their retail space.
So there's not any options for
There wasn't, and they were shown drawings both times, both Thomas Properties and the core group were shown drawings.
I would like to say though, as a part of this project, and it's included in the environmental document, what we want to do is enhance the existing connection between 7th Street Metro and the financial district. So what we included as part of the refinements is providing a pedestrian alley, but it's essentially an enhanced pedestrian environment between 4th and 7th. And what we've been able to do working with DOT is looking at extending the sidewalk on the east side of Flower to allow for pedestrian enhancements and ultimately minimize the actual distance between the financial district and 7th Street Metro. So really working towards changing the perception and really making use of the existing station at 7th and Metro. A lot of work has been done to that extent, and recently at the planning and programming, and I believe, I don't know, at the Central City Association meeting, there were some stakeholders who said, you know what, I'm not interested in this enhanced pedestrian environment because you're taking away any traffic to do it. So that's a recent development. Again, it seems to be voiced by a few, because many of the comments that we have received when we released the draft, and also when we recirculated portions of the draft in the summer, were contrary to that.
The street is like 8 lanes wide, one way
Right.
on that stretch.
Right, I mean, DOT was quite excited about it, and we're really looking at expanding the experience there, having an opportunity to include a bike lane. So, you know, again, that's something that we need to work out further with the stakeholders. It is a part of the project, but there's still a long road from when you approve the environmental document and as you move forward into construction.
There have been a number of problems over the years with utility relocation, particularly with one particular utility. And I'm just wondering if on future projects there might be some possibility that things could be sped up a little bit. Has that been under consideration? Has that been worked on?
So you're referring to what have we been doing to expedite utility relocation?
Yes.
Well, I'll speak specifically to the regional connector. On Flower Street, for example, there's a slew of utilities that go on Route 5. And so our construction team have been working very diligently on various scenarios of what you can do to minimize disruption and ultimately shorten the construction period. One concept that was raised, and again, it was raised as an option. Ultimately, there still needs to be a lot more refinement as you progress towards final design. But one notion was potentially providing raised decking on Flower. That would allow majority of the utilities to be hung in place underneath the deck, and ultimately eliminating prep time or utility relocation, because you would only need to relocate a few utilities versus many, and really where the pylon would be driven into underneath the deck. With raised decking, we would have some access that we would need to do in regards to pedestrian and auto. We did share that as a preliminary thought with the financial district stakeholders, and ultimately that idea still needs to be further defined, because there's a question of, well, how high is the raised decking going to be? How much time are you really going to save me of construction by not removing the utilities, for example? How quickly can you complete the decking, and how completely can you complete the overall construction? So these are the type of questions that we've been asked. I would imagine that a lot of these questions were asked today at the meeting that I wasn't able to attend to. But that's sort of the thought process. Ultimately, we're very concerned about minimizing the construction time. The utilities is number one. Ideally, we would rather not have to relocate them, but in some scenarios you do have to. There is some utility relocation on the eastern end of the alignment, and we've been working really hard in order to minimize relocation of those. And since now we're entering advanced preliminary engineering, there's going to be new information as we proceed.
How cooperative are the utilities? Are they playing nice?
We've started early discussions. So with the PE work, we've been able to set up some meetings and say, these are some preliminary thoughts, what do you think? So we're engaging the utility companies from day one, and they've come back with, well, have you thought of this idea, that idea, we like this, but we don't like that. So I think that has been helpful, talking early versus later. And ultimately, if and when we get our record of decision, we would be at that point in time ready to, we've already outlined some utilities that we could relocate on an early basis prior to construction, so that we can sort of hit the ground running once we get a full funding grant agreement from the FTA.
After seeing the long process of hooking up the Expo lines with Blue Line down in Washington, you essentially have a double connection with the Virgin Temple. You learned a lot of lessons from what happened at Washington, and what would you do differently, since you have to connect both Pasadena side and these guys in that line.
Right. So that is what adds complexity to this project. We have an active gold line that's in service. We'll be maintaining that service during construction. And as we described in the environmental document, that's going to entail the following. Again, this is a worst-case scenario, which will be further refined and minimized as we proceed into final design. But we would need to develop temporary track work, essentially between the existing Tokyo Arts District station to First Street. And during the building of that temporary track work, we would need to, we would have to provide some type of bus bridging. In the environmental document, we say 6 weeks. Again, that's a worst-case scenario. We don't want to get there. We want to get, be able to do that in much less time. But because we just started the PE work, when we were working on the environmental document, we didn't have those type of details with us. In regards to operation, what that would allow us to do then is to maintain service and also allow us to build the portal on First Street. So one potential scenario, and again, this has not been agreed upon by any meeting, but one potential scenario is potentially opening up the east-west line once that portal is completed. And then allow that service to occur while we're completing the north-south direction. Again, that's very preliminary. This, you can invite me back, 12 months from now, and I might have a different scenario. But that's what we're thinking about, in order to provide benefits sooner versus later.
And so much I understood. So then you're going to go under temple.
Correct.
Sounds like a major bus.
Right.
That's the fire station up the street.
Right.
So, surface, under, back up.
Right.
Railroad.
Right.
Next question. Go ahead.
I was just thinking that after you mentioned that, they might be doing different types of alignments, does that mean that they'll be taking a lot of buses off the line?
I'm sorry, they'll be taking
Off the street, I mean,
a lot of,
buses?
no, that's what's different about the regional connector. We're providing a service that doesn't exist. We're, providing efficient service through the region, through downtown, and we're not directly competing with buses. I mean, right now, if you wanted, I'll just speak of the transfers you need to get from like Pasadena to the Staples. That's 2 transfers. There are buses that do make direct connections, but you ultimately need to get access to that. So, as a part of this process, we do need to look at that. But because of the uniqueness of this is not an extension, but this is really a completion of a light rail system, we're not competing with the existing service.
Isn't the schedule to try to get a record of decision before the November election?
Well, yes, ideally, if we would have received project approval last week in February, then we were anticipating record of decision end of March. And so now that we've been continued, then at this point in time, I would say we anticipate a record of decision end of April. But ultimately, the FTA is the one who issues that, and so they really need to feel very confident as they move forward to that decision. Crenshaw, they did have additional considerations prior to issuing the record of decision, and it took 2 or 3 months longer than anticipated.
And once you get a record of decision, how long does it usually take till you get the decision on the funding?
The full funding grant, so record of decision is step 1, and it allows the agency to do certain activities at their own risk. At this point in time, we're still anticipating a record of decision, I would say, May or June of 2013. That's the current schedule.
You mean, wait, the record of decision would be the ROD report?
My apologies, the full funding grant agreement is what we're anticipating in May or June of 2013.
Okay, so that's not really dependent on trying to push this through before the November election.
Right, you mentioned record of decision, correct? So
Decision and funding.
Okay, so decision, yes, prior to November, hopefully in the spring is what we would like. and then full funding grant agreement, May or June of next year.
Next question.
And I would like to add that regional connector along the west side did receive funding in the president's budget, so that was significant for us.
Any more questions? Well, anybody have a party question?
Do you anticipate any Superfund problems? Toxic?
No, we don't have that. I mean, I know on another project, they do have to deal with that. But the regional connector, we haven't identified any issues.
What project has a problem?
Sorry?
What project do you have a Superfund?
East side, phase.
Oh, along the 63.
Right. Right.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
The Superfund, it was asking about the, going through the toxic waste on the 60 freeway, which we took a tour of that 360 tour, and it's quite the, we were radioactive after we left that tour. It took us about a week to be decontaminated. Quite the Superfund out there. But anyways,
I do have one question, but I'm not sure it might be too technical. In the area on Flower that's currently deemed or prospectively deemed to be cut and covered, do you know if that area is considered as gassy?
I have not, that has not come to my attention, so I would say no. There is, the soil conditions are different. There is more mixed space underneath there, so the tunnel boring machine it would be more challenging, there'd be more constraints with that. But I don't recall being gassy being one of the issues, other than the type of soil that existed.
There were existing subway tunnels from the old Red Line. You can still see the entrance underground at 5th and Hill Street, and it went under the Bonaventure, but when they built the Bonaventure, they went through the subway tunnels.
Yeah, but that wouldn't necessarily mean it's gassy or non-gassy. The area, Hope Street to Alameda, is deemed to be gassy, so I understand that. And that requires a special type of TBM. But the dialogue with the cut and cover, if it were deemed to be not gassy, then there is a way to accommodate the financial district cut and cover scheme that has not been discussed in the document. The problem with the TBM in that area is it's too shallow, and there's a danger in not having enough cover when you tie in, if you were to tie in with a TBM to the blue line.
A big part of the issue is there was just no community dialogue with anybody. It just was a unilateral decision.
Are you referring to the removal of the flower?
That and the construction methods, whether it was TBM or cut and cover.
Well, I would like to add that from day one, it's always been cut and cover on 5th and Flower. On Flower Street.
On Flower, no,
Yeah.
that's correct.
It's always, we've said that in all our presentations, we've said that at all our meetings.
In fact, what you've done is reduce the total length of the cut and cover, bringing the TBM further south.
Right, and that was part of the refinements done
Right.
when we initiated our PE phase in January 2010.
I have a question. As far as the 5th and Flower Station, was the business community, did they like, I know like in some cities they would like want to like pay for the station or like pay or create some kind of tax district or something like that? Was any of that ever like, did they ever express that they would pay for it?
Where's $160 million?
Yeah, like around $200 million for a
It
station.
was proposed.
It's either banks, right?
Right.
We had a couple of law firms to sponsor it.
Right, it was proposed, and it was part of the, I'd say, aftermath of the October 2010 board meeting, where the board made a decision not to include 5th and Flower. And so part of the discussion was, would you be interested in funding the project? I was not at those meetings because I was on leave at that time, but my understanding was that they were not, they did not welcome that opportunity. Right, and I think they might have even been offended, you know.
And these are banks.
Right. So the idea was proposed, I mean, keep in mind that this project has never had any money, so every dollar we spend, you know, for all projects, you need to be held accountable, but there are other projects that from day one have had some type of funding, and this project never has.
I can, there was a benefit assessment district, technically two benefit assessment districts on the red line MOS 1 that raised a total of about $140 million to finance a portion of the cost of the 5 stations. And this was so unpopular that the community, mainly the downtown community, went to Sacramento and got new legislation that would make that type of benefit assessment district exceedingly difficult. And believe me, I was the one who wound up, after the Supreme Court decision that allowed it, who got to work with all of the property owners downtown along the line to set that up and try to set the rates. And I give anybody who thinks that could happen again, particularly in a far smaller section of land. We had most of downtown that we were assessing and all the way out Wilshire. And in a small area like that, boy, that's a huge amount of money to try to take out of the parcel owners. I don't think it was ever realistic.
Next question.
Well, thank you, and if you have any questions, hopefully you jotted down our information. Jenny has passed around a sheet, but again, we'll be going to the planning and programming on the 14th and to the full board the following Thursday, the 22nd. And so Bart will keep you informed as to, how, if indeed we get project approval and if we can proceed with the next steps.
Also, if we could get a copy of your PowerPoint electronically, on our website, on our meeting page, we always post our agenda on the meeting page, and we also post the videos that Tony so graciously shoots of the meeting, and at the same time, we'll put your PowerPoint up there. So kindly provide it, and if you're going to stick around for a few minutes, we're going to do our regular part of our meeting with some folks may have a few more questions. You don't need to rush on. Anyways, welcome to the meeting, latecomers. Just so you guys